The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
All right, it's episode number 76, and it is 186 days till the man burns as of this recording. So we just got back from Europe. Navjeet Sarna, the producer and host of Burner Podcast Presents Alkaline, and myself dropped into Berlin and Paris and London, and I had the trip marked in my calendar as Burners in Paris, referencing, of course, the very popular Jay-Z and Kanye track, because I write everything, even in my own personal notes, as if someone might read it and get the reference and a chuckle. So, I don't know. You're welcome, guy who's currently trying to hack my email. Anyway, it's funny. I totally didn't realize how long it had been since I traveled internationally until Nav brought it up like a week before we actually left. And it had been over a decade until just this past week. So, I don't know. My last one was like just the most stereotypical post-college Euro trip you could possibly imagine. Like mushrooms at the Heineken Museum in Amsterdam and Paul van Dyk in Ibiza kind of trip. And it all seems that this time around, the universe had decided that will not be happening for me again. Because we land in Berlin, where I'm ready to do my best to try and probably get denied trying to get into Berghain, arguably the world's best club. And I'm making the quotes here, which you can't see because you're a listener, to discover that, you can look it up, by the way, Berghain, it's a famous club, to discover that Air France had actually lost all my luggage. And I've worked in the nightlife industry, and I know I wouldn't let me in wearing my casual pants and the beaten up sneakers, which I'd been wearing for the past 24 hours on that transatlantic flight. So my techno plans in Berlin were a total wash. Then I got to experience the world's most romantic city, Paris, on Valentine's Day, without my partner, but with Nav, which was exactly the joke that Nav is probably totally sick of hearing by the end of the week. But the highlight of the trip was definitely London. It was really, I love London. I have some family there, and I've been there a few times. And I had the absolute pleasure of recording an interview with Arthur Mamumani, the designer of Burning Man 2018's Temple. And it was just an epic fucking experience. Arthur is such a lovely, lovely human being, and the conversation was really the absolute perfect Burner Podcast interview. We hit all the points I love about doing this show. The human story of the guest, great burn bits, spirituality, art theory. I mean, really, it was all there. We have that episode scheduled for release next. Not today's show, but the one after today is when it's scheduled for. And I cannot wait to share it with you. And today's show is actually one I've been itching to release for a few weeks now. And finally, the schedule is lined up in the way that they're supposed to. And this particular because there's actually, by the way, a rhyme and reason for when the shows come out. I know it's hard to believe, but there is. This particular episode, today's show that we're going to get into right now, today's topic, is very near and dear to my heart, because it's one of those shows that I hope will end with you feeling inspired to take action in your own community. Nothing satisfies me more than seeing a spark of inspiration light a fire under someone's ass. And I hope that today's episode is going to shoot a fire up many people's asses. And I admit that whole wordplay got a little weird and probably didn't make a whole lot of sense. But today's episode is a conversation about healing. We cover a few different approaches, as we usually do on the many episodes about healing that we've done on this show. But predominantly, today we follow the journey and experiences of how brothers Edward and Eric facilitate healing through running a men's council. You probably kind of know what a council is without realizing that you know what it is. It comes from like Lakota tradition. It's where that whole like talking stick thing came from. People sit in a circle and pass the thing around and talk. And so yeah, a lot of today's chat is about man stuff because it's the men's council thing. And I mean man stuff in more like the popularized Western cisgender socialized as males man stuff. And we will get into the reasons for that in the chat that you're about to hear. And one of the things that you will hear us clarify is that this particular council is about man stuff, yes, but the stories behind how it came into existence and the value to be gained from conducting a council is not at all specific to cisgender Western socialized as men, male, whatever. So, you know, council can be utilized in your own community, and your community could be focused on the arts, or it could be your camp, or it could be a more universal mental health focused type of thing. Edward, whose voice you're going to be hearing shortly, he will sound very familiar to you. And the reason for that is because he was our guest on episode number 49, entitled Our Friend the Combo Frog. Combo, I'm still not sure how to pronounce that. That episode was all about the Combo Frog ceremony, which I could best describe as like the non-psychoactive sibling of ayahuasca, meaning you puke and poop and don't trip and don't actually see anything. So yeah, it's all the stuff that comes out of your body without the visual tripping and stuff. So we start by talking about Combo again for a little bit, and sitting with Edward will be his brother Eric. Eric and Edward, of course, do run the council together. We're going to get into their own background and relationship, which as always involves some fun festival adventures. Eric kind of gets to meet God in a tent. And then we'll talk about some legit guy shit in general. Men's relationship with porn, masturbation, and sexuality is a big topic that is discussed. Lots of talk about feelings and emotions, addiction, and I'm pretty sure no one actually farts, which just goes to show how woke we are. So the name of today's episode comes from a beautifully constructed string of words, which is used to describe something not necessarily totally favorable, as you will hear in pretty much, I think, like the first 15 to 20 minutes of the conversation. The way that it's used there is not, and it's a description of something that I've talked about multiple times on this show, so I loved running across this phrase. But we are going to reappropriate that phrase in order for it to mean something beautiful when it comes to the title of today's show, since today's show is all about healing and counsel. Today's episode is entitled An Addiction to Catharsis. Ooh, chills. My other favorite phrase from this episode, by the way, I love this. Secrets are a petri dish of shame. Oh man, that's a really good one. Edward's got a lot of good ones. Anyway, I go by Mr. Arashi, but nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was the fly with the balls and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no name.
A lot like ancients, if you look back. The older texts, there's a lot of similarities. They sometimes share the same names.
Jinn?
Yeah.
I always thought Jinn, my understanding was they're made of fire.
And then there's that as well. So some of the older texts kind of show them as more akin to angels.
Right.
And then there is, I think, a little more of that mystic side where they are almost fire elementals.
Yeah.
And I've heard both.
Totally not related to the talk that we're going to have in a minute. There's a movie called Under the Shadow, which has Jinn characters in it, but it's the Middle Eastern, like the understanding of Jinn that I grew up with in Iran was that it was kind of like more evil spirits.
Which I've heard as well.
Right. But so I'm not entirely familiar because as with all of these things, when you have over 1,000 years of history with something, you're going to have different interpretations and understandings and words. But yeah, there's a movie called Under the Shadow, which I cannot recommend enough if you have Netflix.
For sure.
It takes place during the Iran-Iraq War, and it's kind of it's a haunted house movie basically, where you have like a parent, like you have the mom and the daughter type archetype story, and it's like a ghost story. But it takes place during the era that I lived in Iran. And so there's a lot of stuff that happens that's like straight out of my childhood. Wow. And it was super trippy, but it's like this brilliant ghost story, and it's really quite terrifying. But at the same time, like the brilliance of it is that the main character is like the mom character, and she just like, it gets into deeper and deeper levels of isolation, which keeps making it scarier and scarier. So it's like not just the isolation she's experiencing from being like the main character in a ghost story, but then it gets into like isolation as a woman in Iran, isolation in that community, isolation from her husband. There's all these deeper layers that he keeps getting to, and it's so fucking good.
Oh, that's cool.
Interesting. But yeah, the basic premise is that her husband goes off to war, and it's her and her daughter in their condo, in their apartment, and a bomb crashes into the top of the building, which doesn't detonate. And they clean it up, but apparently this bomb has brought with it something. Really, guys, I just gave myself chills.
I do it all the time. It's that deep voice.
So... Edward, the last time I was in your apartment, I was violently vomiting on your floor.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Let's.
I always say people actually don't come over here to visit; they just come over here to throw up.
I was really glad it's. I've been holding in that intro since we booked this show. In addition to that, I also want to share. I remember after I finished vomiting profusely on your floor, I was like, I'm pretty sure more people have thrown up in your apartment than in my frat house.
Oh yeah.
Almost assuredly.
Yeah. It was, and so for the listeners, I'm not sure if I've told this story, but the last time, Edward, that you were on, it was the combo frog ceremony.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, it's like been pretty awesome watching how you've like done the rounds, because then you were on Halcyon's show talking about your storyteller consortium. And then now I have both you and your brother Eric on the show to talk about the Brotherhood Circle. So these are these three different aspects of your ventures that I've known about you since we met. And that means that you've been working on since we met. And so I feel this is really wonderful to have you on here as well, Eric, and to bring this whole thing full circle.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so the last time I was here, I got to partake in the combo frog ceremony, which is it pronounced Cambo?
In America, a lot of people say Cambo.
Yeah.
In South America, everyone says Combo. I prefer Combo because I grew up in Western New York where everyone has a hard A in their accent. So Cambo to me just reminds me of Buffalo, and I'm like, so I say Combo, but they're both correct.
Oh, good. I've been saying it correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I had not, at the time that we recorded the episode, I hadn't done it yet. And then I ended up actually partaking in my first ayahuasca ceremony with Charles, another 2-time guest of the show.
Nice.
And it's interesting. I did not purge in that experience. And I remember like afterwards, I was actually chatting with you a little bit about the experience and saying like, I feel still very heavy. Like I feel like I'm not I don't know, it was difficult. It wasn't like, finishing ayahuasca and feeling like floaty and light and happy, which I don't know why I thought that would be the case. But then that's when I really felt called to Cambo and I combo. And I came here and I threw up a lot in your apartment, and that I felt like really cleared whatever was stuck.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting because since then, I feel like this is something we talked about in our previous conversation about the very well-meaning friends that we have, friends in the community, friends in our personal lives, who seem like they're constantly asking the question over and over. Like they keep visiting the beyond, asking the same question over and over, and they're given an answer like, here's what you do, go on to the next chapter of your life. And they won't do it. They just keep going back and asking the same question, it seems like. And every week they're experiencing another visionary, trip, and then they come back and it seems like they're not quite implementing it.
Yeah.
And so, I'd love your thought on this, by the way, but what I've experienced since the Cambo has been that I feel this like laser focused clarity
still
on everything that I'm working on. I've had a couple of other opportunities to partake in experiences, 5MEO, the opportunity came up to do that. And I was like, no, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I have clarity right now. I know this chapter of my life is about focusing and just execution. And once the time arrives again, I'm looking forward to returning and seeing what's next.
Yeah.
But right now, it's just like laser focused clarity.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great,
I'm glad that you're still riding that wave. Yeah, that was before Burning Man.
A while ago, so...
Yeah, it's fucking cool. Yeah, it was months ago.
Yeah, it had to be in early August.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So that's great.
Well, and the night that we did the ceremony, there was another gentleman here who hadn't done it in like 6 years, I want to say.
I couldn't. I work on so many people.
Yeah.
Like they all they blend together after a while.
How many people do you think have vomited in this apartment?
I mean,
So we do the math here.
close to. I mean, probably 100.
Oh,
It's got to be
well
more
over
than
at
100.
this point.
Well over.
I don't know, 150, 180,
Let's
something
say,
like that.
Yeah.
I've worked on a lot of people at this point, and it's nice for me. I have a daily prayer practice, and there's moments of the day which I have my own. I'm a fucking hippie. I pray at 11:11 and 4:44. What are you gonna do? But sometimes it's 95% of the time for someone else or something else. It's not usually for me. And a default prayer I go back to often is just sending love to everyone that I've ever served combo to. I look at it as like it's that pebble in the pond. It's that fractal where it goes out. Where it's I serve the combo and they have whatever experience they're going to have, and then to hear you come back. I mean, we're talking. I mean, what are we in December now? Almost 5 months later, and to say you still have that laser focus for me, I'm like, yes.
Before we started recording, I was telling you guys about some of my productivity practices, and that's. It's been I feel like Combo showed me how to get on the surfboard. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, now I'm just riding that wave. Yeah.
and that's the best integration practice you can do, is like the man that we sit with now for ayahuasca he's like, do your homework. Do your homework. And he says, poco a poco, like little by little. And it could be something as simple as like clean your room. Get the spider webs out of the corner, whatever little things to do. But for me, it's this act of setting the table. Like really making the space nice so that when we invite these things in, they're nice, right. Dressing up for the genius to come. It's important.
Yeah. I think, an example that I've seen over and over is, like when people have like their first DMT trip and they, oh my God, we're all one, they have that experience. And then, we come back, and, the first thing a lot of us want to do is, we must give DMT to everyone because we must save the world, and everyone must have this. And then, after, I want to say for me, it took a year or so to come to the conclusion that, ultimately, you've got to choose the path, and any one of these experiences can can contribute to the path to help you figure these out, but they're not like a they're not a one fixed pill. You know?
No, I actually had a conversation today with a friend about getting addicted to the catharsis, which happens a lot. You see,
I think that's what I was just describing.
Yeah, that's what brought it up for me. I mean, you see time and time again people that are going back to different medicines, I mean, even if it's just, you sit in sweat lodge 3 times a week, like that's well and good if you're doing the work outside of the sweat lodge as well. You have to, there's a book I'm reading, the author's name is Jack Kornfield, and he talks about one of the paramount things in spiritual practice is kind of bringing the mountaintop down to you instead of always looking up for the mountaintop.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal author.
Yeah.
But that's one thing is we kind of get lost in the vision and forget the lesson a lot of times when it comes to medicine work. And it's implementation of the lesson. You don't necessarily have to remember absolutely everything about what got you there, but remember what you got.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just the other day, actually, I was listening to an interview between Gary Vaynerchuk and Tony Robbins, and they were describing catching the people in the audience who are doing the same thing that you're describing, which like every week they're at another one of these like seminars, and they're just like going from seminar to seminar, and like I think they were saying it was either Tony or Gary that was saying like that I think it was Tony saying that it was like years later, and they would even find people that are just constantly coming back over and over and over and over, and you're like, bro, like we've told you what to do. It's time to go do it.
Yeah, we gave you the keys.
Yeah. The addicted to catharsis, though, that is a perfect description.
Yeah.
That's going to save me ways to describe that thing.
Well, it's looking, I came to the medicine from a history of addiction, and I realized that I got addicted to the fireworks, to the grandiose orchestral overtures of change that one can experience when one is first introduced to this path of awakening. And for me, it was like, I want it to be like this every time, like angels coming down and ripping cancer out of me while fireworks go off all over the place. And I got hooked on that, and I was not looking for the details. So now and largely, I mean, to even do a nice segue into the men's counsel stuff, it's like the act of one of the most incredible thing that counsel has taught me to do is to listen. One of the intentions of counsel is listening from the heart, or attentive listening, and when you take the practice outside of the circle of counsel, and the goal is to live the way of counsel and to always be in counsel with life. So I'm not only in counsel with my brothers when I'm in the talking circle, or in counsel with every human being that I have a conversation with, but to do our best to remember to be in counsel with our own bodies, and to be in counsel with the stories that we tell ourselves, and to be in counsel with the wind and the sunshine and the birds and the moments of silence, and to be in counsel with every living thing. And that for me was the other side of that, being addicted to the very attractive, almost Hollywood type medicine catharsis that can come. And I'm finding now that the work that she's telling me over and over and over and over is pay attention, listen deeply, deeply, deeply. So that's kind of the other side of that. And granted, I made all the mistakes of being on the cathartic side of that, but
I mean, we have, and this is, I love episodes like this because it's gonna. I mean, I love all of them, but it's one of those that I already knew coming into it. That this is one of those that people can pass around to each other, and my payoff for this episode would be, I'm going to make up a name, Hamid in Pensacola, Florida, is going to start their own chapter of Men's Counsel.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. Do it, Hamid.
Do it, Hamid. I know if your name's Hamid and you grew up in Pensacola, Florida, you probably had a tough upbringing. But, ideally, like that, by the time this episode's over, this will inspire others to, even if, whatever, you can start your own gathering, start your own circle. Just the other day, I was listening to, I was reading a a piece about how self-improvement and personal growth should very much be, not necessarily should, like it can very much be such a group activity, and how much more power it has when it's a group activity. So we have a lot of your backstory. Let's talk about when I want to go through sort of the time that you got involved with Men's Counsel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Eric, you started to come into it a little bit later.
Yeah, probably about 8-9 months after you had taken it over.
It's hard to say. Did you start sitting before we moved to Uncle's house or not?
Yeah.
Before we moved.
Sunset Cliffs was my first circle.
That would have been
March or April of
2016 or 15?
16.
Okay, so it was a little over a year old by that point.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
You were one of the OG members, Arash.
Yeah.
I continually, not continually, but will often refer to, because we show up no matter who comes. If there's 16 people, awesome. If there's 5, cool. And I will sometimes bring up the smallest council ever, which was in fact just you and I.
Yeah.
Sitting in that space.
That was
being like, well, we wanted to hang out. We had an awesome night.
Yeah. That was fantastic.
It was great.
Yeah, and I mean, I already had a taste of how healing that experience can be from my fraternity days at San Diego State, because we had a similar thing. That I mean, our we had something called Candlelight, and it was based on the same origins as Men's Counsel. We had a similar ancestor. So tell me about when the idea, when the concept entered your consciousness, when you learned that this was a thing, and when you started to kick around the idea of starting it here.
This would have been the summer of 2014. There was a friend of mine, Joe, had started a Men's Counsel, and he kept just inviting me, and I kept not showing up. And then he kind of got a little bit more like, what the fuck? And his invites like, dude, you gonna come to this Men's Counsel or not? And I kept not showing up. I always had a better reason to go on. I'm sure that deep down there was some sort of resistance that I was just acquiescing to. Then I finally did show up, and there were only 4 of us there, and it was a very, compared to how we do it now, very unstructured version of Men's Counsel, and it was deeply powerful and shifted a lot for me. And then Joe moved to Oregon like 2 weeks later, and it just hit me. It was just one of those whispers in my ear from wherever you want to call it that said, hey, keep this going. Yeah. And I asked Joe, I was like, I want to keep this up, man. Can I do this? And he was like, yeah. So we had a little ceremony around it. And we used to use a gavel for a talking stick back then. So he passed me the gavel, and I started doing them. That was when we were doing a lot of stuff at Start Space, this space in Golden Hill where you sat. I'm sorry, can I go back? So just to clarify, at this time you weren't working with the Combo Frog yet. I was sitting with Combo for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I was not administering Combo, but I was receiving. I was sitting as a participant in Combo ceremonies anywhere from 1 to 3 times a month. Back then. Wow. Okay.
You were vomiting that violently 3 times a month?
Sure.
Fuck.
Addicted to catharsis, Raj.
I know. People kept. I mean, the day after I did my ceremony, I went for a run on the beach, and then when I finished, I ended up like running into a bunch of workout crew people, and I showed them the piercings or the gates in my foot, and they were like, "How was it?" I'm like, "Awful! Oh, it's horrible. It's like your insides are trying to crawl out of you from your throat and whatever other orifice they can get their hands on." Anyway, I just want to share that. But so you were receiving at this time, not yet a facilitator, and you were doing the Storyteller Consortium at this time, or were you just writing?
I was doing the Storyteller. I was doing the Story Consortium.
Okay.
Yeah, the Story Consortium was well active, well established by the time the Men's Counsel came around.
And that was in the same space?
Same space,
okay.
Yeah.
And so for the listeners who aren't familiar, this space was like a multi-use space?
Yeah. It was a community center, basically, is what it came down to. I hosted the Story Consortium, our open mic, I call it transformative storytelling shows there, and we had Flow and Tell, which was just open mic whatever, open mic poetry, open mic freestyle, music, anything. And I mean, we did art classes. It was an amazing just community center that we had going there.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So
yeah, and so on like one night a week you were doing the Story Consortium, and another night you started doing you were doing Flow and Tell, and you were also started the Men's Council out of there. So Eric, where were you during this period?
I was here.
Okay.
I had a very, very different life at that point. I was a professional kitchen worker and had been spent about a good 8 years in the kitchen. And I was a heavy drinker, and there was a lot of resistance to, we grew up in a blue collar, kind of Irish hard drinking upbringing. That's back east. That's just kind of where we grew up, and you didn't talk about your feelings, and you drank them away until you fell asleep on the floor. And then you got up and you did it all over again, and that was really my life.
Vomiting for different reasons.
Not to get healthy.
Yeah, very different reasons.
And you're watching your brother doing all this crazy hippie shit, and like what's going through your mind as you're seeing it?
I was happy for him, absolutely.
You guys were always close.
Yeah, we still lived together back then too.
Yeah, we've lived here 5 years, 6 years, 5 years. I was happy for him, and he would say, well, "This is going to sound weird," and it, for whatever reason, never seemed out of the realms of possibility for me that any of this could be happening, any spiritual interventions or anything like that. It never seemed strange to me. It was just kind of like, well, that's not my gig, man. I'm here to play with fire and knives and curse and drink like a sailor, and that's what I kept doing until I couldn't anymore. And I was at a restaurant. I had gotten promoted, unbeknownst to myself, and I think the rest of the crew. I had gotten promoted to chef de cuisine, which was a position I didn't really want. I had stepped down from a sous chef position and was only working 4 days a week, and I was kind of starting to get on the road to becoming a little healthier. I was cutting out the booze. I was drinking tea at the end of the night instead of, drinking another 22 and smoking one last spliff. So I was trying, and then I got promoted and was like, okay, well, I got one last good shot left in me. And it was a chef that I really respected and still do respect, and so I gave it my all. I was not allowed to hire or fire anybody, but was still in charge of 12 people, and I lost my ever-loving goddamn fucking mind. So I gave that about 8 months, and then by the end I was just crazed. I was insane. The only way I could get anybody to listen to me was by just berating the shit out of them. Yeah. Which I did well, but that's not a very admirable trait. Yeah. So I just got to a point where I sat down with my chef and I said, "Hey, I've got a month left, and that's what I've got for you." Right. And I quit, and was immediately provided an opportunity to go work at Lightning in a Bottle. So I was working on the Harvest Kitchen food truck. Okay. So I went there, and it was gnarly. We worked our asses off. We fed, probably well over 10,000 people. At the end of the day, we did almost $30,000 in business in 3 days. And there was one night, a couple beers after service, smoked a spliff. I was like, I'm going to smoke a big spliff and go walk around and explore. Spliff floored me. I was unable to explore. But I went into my tent and I started writing, and I just kind of noticed an odd clarity, considering the spliff I had just smoked. Right. And the next thing I knew, I was starting to do yoga poses. I'd never done a day of yoga in my life at that point.
In your tent?
In my tent.
Wow.
It's, 2, 3 in the morning, somewhere in that general vicinity.
What strain of weed was this?
If I recall correctly, it was Gorilla Glue. Okay. Which is not one that's going to make you get up and do anything. Yeah. And every time I would finish a pose or a vinyasa, words would come out of my mouth. Repressed memories, just things that I knew to be truths about my behavior and what it was doing to myself and what it was doing to the people around me and how it was affecting just my overall life and well-being.
Wow.
And woke up and didn't really talk about it all that much to the rest of the cooks.
Yeah.
And that next night, I was like, okay, I'm going to do something I never do. I'm at a festival. I'm going to take a little MDMA. So we're playing cards after service, and Phil starts to kick in, and I'm like, I don't feel very good. So I go into my tent. Same thing. I did yoga for probably 4.5, 5 hours. And again, kind of finishing poses.
Yeah.
I now know it to be chaturanga. I would finish it, and words would come out of my mouth.
So the moves were just kind of coming to you naturally?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
And that night felt what my first experience with what I would call psychic surgery. And I could feel my diaphragm getting worked on. I had shoulder pain at the time, and that was getting worked on.
Wow.
And I had an experience with ayahuasca once before that, but it didn't really, I had a lot of resistance to it, and the human mind is incredibly powerful, and if it doesn't want these things to happen, most of the time they won't happen.
Right.
And
why? I'm sorry. Why don't you take MDMA at festivals?
because I was working.
Okay. All right.
Just wasn't something that was on the docket when I got a 16-hour day the next day.
Right.
But went to sleep at some point. Thank God everybody else had earplugs in because I'm making noises and bashing around my tent all night.
Wow.
I woke up the next morning, and at that time in my life, I never woke up before noon. I woke up at 7:30 in the morning feeling better than I had felt in years.
Wow.
And that was really my first, okay, you can heal and you do not have to accept this lifestyle for what it is, and things can change for you.
Okay, so this has been, so at this point, Edward, you'd been doing men's counsel for a year when this happened? Is this timing right?
And I was actually in an ayahuasca ceremony that weekend.
Wow.
Because he had sent me a text thinking that I was somehow sending this to him. And,
what are you fucking doing to me?
Yeah. And I was like, I wish I was that powerful, dude. Yeah, I had been doing men's counsel for, if it was lightning in bottles, August, so.
No, it was April.
April
or May of 2015.
I would have been doing men's counsel for a little over a year at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is absolutely not where I expected that story to go.
Fair enough.
I want to go back to the earlier days of the men's council, and then we're going to come back to when you join in. So earlier days, you're doing it at the community center that we described earlier, and at some point it moves to your home.
Yeah, the community center, we lost that, so I moved it here, which wasn't ideal because it's a little small.
All right.
And then in the summer, we'd go down to Sunset Cliffs Beach, No Surf Beach down there, which is just idyllic. You've got your own private beach, essentially. And then the next move after that was when I started to get pretty involved in the Native American church here and doing a lot of sweat lodges and kind of entering into a mentee-mentor type relationship with the founder of this particular branch of Oklava, the Native American Church. And he had been pretty active in men's work in his life and is still very active in addiction recovery work and spiritual transformation work, which a lot of the guys that are attracted to the council, those are things that pop up for them. So we moved it to his backyard, and that's really where it's been ever since. It's a nice location for it. And
so how did the way that you do the ceremonies shift over this time period? I'm sorry, so when you move it to the backyard here, Eric at this point is involved. We jumped back forward again?
No, I had another, we'll call it a spiritual bitch slap, because I wasn't listening. And I joined in 2016.
Okay.
After a little tussle with the sidewalk.
Fucking things jump out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, man.
Who put El Cajon Boulevard there?
Tell me, Edward, about your first council. obviously not people's individual stories, but like what was the experience, right? What were you feeling? Were you confident? Were you, did you have stage fright?
I mean, I can't remember the actual first one.
Right.
I imagine I probably didn't have stage fright because I'm so used to I've been doing the Story Consortium for a while at that point. I'm used to public speaking and I'm used to facilitating groups of people as well.
This was a natural progression for you.
I think it was a natural progression. It felt pretty natural. And I just kind of dove in to be like, we'll just talk. It was I look back at it now and it makes me smile because it was so cute and innocent where I was like, we'll just talk. We'll just sit down and we'll pass this stick around and we'll talk, which is still what Counsel is. I
remember there was a lot less structure earlier on.
Oh, yeah, a lot less. I mean, we had no timer. We had no tenets of Counsel. And, sometimes because people love to be heard because when people... being actually heard is unfortunately a new experience for a lot of people. And when people are like, holy shit, these people are listening to me, it just keeps pouring out of them sometimes, which can be a bit much after 8, 10, 12 minutes, So
this might actually be the perfect time to sort of describe what was the process at that time period in like the earlier days? In
the earlier days, it was pretty... unhewn, I would say. We just passed the talking stick around.
We'd a group of gentlemen would show up to the venue.
Yeah.
You'd kind of just start by announcing that we're opening the circle and whatever is said here stays private in this circle. And there was a talking stick, which was the gavel.
Yeah.
Right. And we would basically pass that around. And as long as you were holding this gavel, you could talk.
Yeah.
No interruptions, no stopping you.
That was it.
And there was no other structure to it at that time.
No, pretty much. And I started doing pretty quickly the first actual structure I implemented, which we actually don't do anymore, but we could do. It was kind of nice. Is that I had everyone write on a little piece of paper their reason for coming that night, or their intention, or what they would like to get out of their experience. Right. There was really a kind of a pretty open-ended framework for what constituted what you wrote on that. And we'd put all of them in a box. And at the end, everyone would pick one out of a box and everyone would read what was on the piece of paper that they had picked, which most often was not their own sheet of paper. And my thought behind that, which did work, but it works without the paper as well, was to just, you'd read what was on the piece of paper, even if it wasn't yours, or you'd hear what other people had written, and you would see how it related to you. Mm-hmm. And it would see how it related to your experience in Counsel. So that was the first general kind of new format thing that we brought in. And then I began to research Counsel, and that led me to the Ojai Foundation, which is in Ojai, California. And they are a nonprofit that is entirely committed to the propagation of Counsel in as many populations and walks of life as they can reach. And they've been active for at least 40 years, if not a little more. And so Counsel, this idea of sitting in a circle with a talking stick and sharing, is not particular to any one culture or tribe or region. It's rather ubiquitous the world over. I'm sure there's a form of it in Iran. There's forms of it all over the world. The Ojai Foundation specifically draws from the Lakota tradition and actually the Quaker tradition. And they merge a lot of these.
Interesting.
And when I found the Ojai Foundation, it was like this whole world opened up of what Counsel can be. And
so your predecessor in San Diego was kind of winging it?
He was winging it for sure. Yeah.
How did he come up with the idea to do a men's council?
I couldn't tell you. He was he's a guy on the spiritual path, and I don't know if he went to one somewhere else or what. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure as hell glad he did it though.
Yeah. So yeah, me too. So what shifted in the way that you ran Counsel after you discovered Ojai?
Well, I read the Counsel book, and I learned about the tenets or the intentions of Counsel, which are speaking from the heart, listening from the heart, practicing spontaneity, practicing confidentiality, being lean of expression, and asking oneself before speaking, do my words serve me? Do my words serve the counsel? And do my words serve the greater good? And I began to implement only the first 4 tenets of speaking from the heart, listening from the heart, practicing spontaneity, and confidentiality, and really diving into a pretty thorough explanation of what those mean to the men and asking for agreements. Like, do we agree to uphold these tenets in our practice of counsel this evening?
Can we explain them?
Sure. They're in no particular order because they're all completely contingent upon one another. Listening from the heart, or attentive listening, I also like to call empathetic listening, because to me, listening with empathy means practicing the art of listening and giving one the gift of listening in the way that one would want to be listened to. And that is to say that when one is in a talking circle and finds themselves with the talking piece in their hands, I can all but guarantee that they are going to feel that what they have to say is important, and possibly very important. And they might be saying something out loud that they've never said out loud, or they've never shared with anyone else. And there's a quote that I wholeheartedly believe in, and it says that listening is the purest and most genuine gift of love. And it really is. To be heard is a gift. We give the speaker the gift of our attentive listening. In the Ojai Foundation book, they say when we practice attentive listening, we listen with the same ear that a new parent would give to their child attempting to form its first words.
Wow.
That's listening. You're not going to care about the laundry or what your girlfriend said to you or the phone that's buzzing in your pocket. You are going to be completely and utterly dropped into a space of loving stillness and receiving everything that that person has to say. And one of the main obstacles to doing that is not practicing spontaneity, is rehearsing what it is that we want to say. And this is where they all become tied in, because if we rehearse what it is we want to say, we also can't be speaking from the heart. We're speaking from the head. And most people, and I'm not exonerating myself from any of this, just because I practice counsel doesn't mean I'm always there, but most people spend a lot of the day speaking from the head. A lot of jobs require us to speak from the head. A lot of cultures and familial dynamics require us to speak from the head. Speaking from the heart it's not accepted in a lot of places. So they're all contingent upon each other. We listen with that same ear that a mother would give to her child attempting to form its first words. We practice empathetic listening. We practice spontaneity in our speech by not rehearsing what it is that we are going to say, so that we can be completely 100% present in our listening, and so that we can practice speaking from the heart. And speaking from the heart means that we ask of our participants to speak as transparently, as truly, as deeply, and as vulnerably as their level of comfort in that moment allows for. We do not ever ask anyone to push beyond their boundaries in a way that would not be healthy to them. People can say pass at any time. You can take that stick and you can say pass, and you can pass it on to the next person, and you can choose to participate by listening.
Right.
Good tools to practice speaking from the heart would include not speaking in the second person you, which is endemic in our society. I do it too. Mm-hmm. You know, when this happens and it makes you feel like this, and then you do this, and then you say this to your friend, when really the person is talking about something that happened to them. And when we say I, we own our experience. So we can really practice speaking from the heart. When this happened to me and it made me feel this way, and I said this to my friend rather than projecting it out. A second useful tool for speaking from the heart is to stop before one speaks, to get that talking stick and take a deep breath and let the words come out. And that's that essence of practicing spontaneity. In our counsel, we use a technique called the internal weather report. It's kind of a good way to get men talking sometimes, and it's pretty simple. It's like, what's the weather like in there, buddy? You know, and a lot of times you can tell guys are maybe a little bit nervous or they're not quite sure what to make of the whole thing, and they'll start talking about the weather, and then sure enough, the real stuff comes out after that. It's like, what's that hurricane named again? Yeah. And then the fourth is confidentiality, and that's pretty cut and dry. What happens in the circle stays in the circle. The last two tenets I usually introduce in our second round, which I can describe the format now, or I can describe it later. I don't know what you prefer. Yeah. Our first round, we do what's called a sunwise round. It's a clockwise round, and that's just what you would expect. It's you just pass the stick in a clockwise circle, and everyone shares. We keep the timer at 5 or 6 minutes per person. And then the second round, we do a spiderweb round. And that is so called because the talking stick doesn't go in any particular order. So say one person has the stick, they're short shares, 2-3 minutes tops. It's kind of to add upon anything that you maybe didn't get to say in the first round, or if there's anything that came up for you, you can speak to that. Or if there's something another man said that you want to respond to, or some advice you want to offer, or a question you want to ask, anything's fair game. But they're short. So one man speaks, he puts the stick back in the middle. Any man can grab it and then speak and put it back in the middle. And then anyone else can grab it. So the stick actually forms a spider web as it moves around. And we introduce the fifth and sixth tenets for the spider web round, which are being lean of expression, which simply means to practice brevity. You got 2-3 minutes. Don't talk around what it is you want to say. Get right to the point. And the sixth one is to ask oneself, do my words serve myself? Do my words serve the circle? And do my words serve the greater good? So that's the crux of what I have brought to the Brothers United Men's Council from Ojai. However, it is scratching the surface of Counsel. There are myriad formats, myriad forms. Sky is the limit with this stuff. And it's just, we have a very simple form of it because it works, and it's extraordinarily accessible to people who have never done it before. Right. And that's the key, because we get new people all the time, thank God. Yeah. And we don't need to be throwing these advanced forms of counsel at people that are maybe a little nervous about being there in the first place.
No, it's very accessible.
Yeah.
So that's what you bring back. And then let's jump back forward to Eric, to your your awakening with the sidewalk. At this point, have you attended had you attended the men's councils?
No, I had not.
I remember at some point, I want to say I have a memory of you stepping over us to go to work or something.
Probably, or coming home from work, and then probably leaving to go to the bar.
Yeah.
Just resistance. I usually did work Tuesday nights at that point as well. And I finally got out of the kitchen, and then I had my tussle with the sidewalk, which I definitely lost. And
it's a lot bigger than you.
It's a lot harder too. Yeah. And everything kind of shifted for me after that. You hear about people getting tremendous whacks on the head and kind of having everything change, and it's almost like turning a key and the tumbler starts to fall into place. And the council was a very big piece of the tumbler falling into place for me that I was just resistant to out of fear.
Right. When you came to your first one, did it immediately feel natural, or did it take some work to open up?
I'm not entirely sure I was able to get any words out through the sobbing, to be perfectly honest with you. I felt its power immediately. It was down at Sunset Cliffs, and I think I was pretty early on in the shares, and as I said, I don't really think I could get a whole lot of words out. I was pretty racked with tears, but it was just gratitude. And I remember very distinctly the spiderweb round. What came to me was the idea of strength through shared vulnerability, and that is paramount to what counsel is, and it become paramount to the way I'm living my life now.
What was, if you're able to share, sort of like the biggest thing the thing that you can share, the biggest thing that you personally got out of it that gave you the most clarity?
Solidarity. I was always kind of a go it alone type of individual. I'm like, I'll get through it. It's fine. I'm tough. Fuck it. Whatever. And that's simply not true. We've never done anything on our own.
Yeah.
We had parents. That right there just means you didn't do anything by yourself. So it was really shattering that illusion of isolation for me that opened me up to, I mean, where I am now and trying to move through the world with an open heart and an open mind and be kind and be compassionate and appreciate the small healing that comes from being considerate towards oneself and others.
Right. I almost want to say, like, it's, I think for a lot of men, for a lot of people in general, but like a lot of us feel like we are parts of communities and social circles, and then you sit down at a thing like this where you do kind of let down all of your walls and you watch other people let down all their walls in a beautiful display of camaraderie and solidarity like you're describing. And I feel like that really opens a lot of the doors of like, oh shit, I think a lot of people don't realize how isolated they are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's endemic among men. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's literally a problem. They're watching suicide rates among men hitting their late 30s to early 40s just escalate because, if I recall the reading that I've done about this correctly, that's a stage in which sometimes men are getting divorced or they're going through career changes, and it's just realizing that they don't have those tight brotherhoods that they may have had with sports teams or fraternities or whatever it is, and we are wired for tribe. Make no mistake. I mean, that is one of the things that I inconsequentially believe from all of the work that I've done, not only with medicines, but with the Story Consortium and the Men's Council, is that we are wired for tribe. We are not wired to be alone. We are wired for interdependence rather than independence. And we are very much interdependent. And it's so much easier to make it, in my opinion, in the world when one feels that one has a community that one can really be genuine and authentic around without fear of judgment. And it's unfortunately more rare than it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, because, I mean, more than anything, I imagine a common topic of discussion for a lot of men who join Men's Council. I know it's been tons for me, because I've sent a few different people in this direction. Mm-hmm. Of like, you should go do this thing. I would absolutely do it if I didn't have meetings on those nights, but you should absolutely go do this thing. Yeah. And because I see it clear as day, how much society trains men to hide their feelings.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. It's programmed into us. I mean, this is like, by the way, across so many different cultures. I mean, I come from a Middle Eastern background. You have a Irish background. Like it's across so many different cultures. It's kind of like beaten into our heads that a real man is going to tough it out. Stick out your chest. You're not going to get sad. You're going to get mad.
Yeah.
You're not going to go share your feelings with somebody. You're just going to punch them in the face. Like it's been programmed into us. It's been beaten into us that this is the way a man deals with it. And so with Men's Council, for I think a lot of men, it's the first time they may have had an experience where they're sitting down and seeing multiple other men who are guys that, if they just ran into in the street, they would just think, all right, here's another dude that I'm going to respect because I don't want to get, I don't want to get into a fight. Mm-hmm. And then when you sit down and you have this conversation, you're like, oh shit, it looks like there are other men out there who have vulnerabilities, and they're taking a cue and they're sharing these vulnerabilities and sharing these emotions and sharing the tears together. And that opens up that person more to be able to go in deeper than they ever knew was possible.
Totally. And it's almost a cliche thing that comes out of my mouth at this point, but it's, I mean, it's quite obvious that we have got to rewrite the masculine paradigm that we have been handed, because it's not working. It's despicable, in my opinion. And, you know, if the definition of being a man means being tough and being strong, what is tougher and requires more strength than allowing oneself to be completely transparent and vulnerable with the people that they love?
Absolutely.
That's way harder than beating someone's ass, or maybe even going to war, because we've had plenty of veterans roll through, and a lot of them have, not a lot, but some of them have made these correlations of like, I'd almost rather go into battle than do this right now, you know, because it's the enemy, if there is anything that can be called an enemy, is not so point-toable as this outside source that is trying to extract X, Y, and Z from our country. Right. It is the other side of us that is within us, and it's much less palpable, and it's a lot sneakier than anything that we could fight from the outside. And to sit in that space of transparency and vulnerability without reaction, but to wait for that space to teach us the proper response to cultivate, that, to me, is, that's where true masculinity lies. That's Absolutely. Where true masculinity lies, in my opinion. And it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's I've definitely, I mean, I've learned this lesson over and over, that like the ultimate characteristic of confidence is comfort with vulnerability.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know, like it's when you're the alpha lion, you know, you're not, there's that, you know, the thing that animals always like protect their jugular. Like, you know, like when you have a pet, you know, they trust you when they're showing you their jugular. Mm-hmm. It's a way to communicate to you. I care about you. You're not going to eat me. And that's what you see in sort of like the biggest, most powerful, you know, animals are the ones like, I'm not fucking afraid of you. I'm not afraid of showing you everybody. Like because I'm walking around like I own this place. Mm-hmm. And that's emotionally, that's definitely an experience that I've seen. I wonder when you guys are sitting in these councils, does it feel like people catch on to this idea pretty quickly, or does it take a few sessions for people to warm up? What has been your experience in council?
I think sometimes I've seen utter confusion upon showing up, and a little bit of a resolution of that confusion towards the end, and then maybe I don't know if it's for me, but I'm going to come back. Yeah. And then you look at that person 6 months later, and it's like they're a totally different human being. So it's, when we were speaking of like catharsis, this is a gradual cathartic process. Mm-hmm. Instead of looking for the fireworks, you're actually sitting in the grass and listening to the song that the wind is playing. And that slow progression is such a beautiful thing to be a witness to. And by witnessing that, we facilitate healing in ourselves as well. And it's just a double-sided healing whammy, if you will.
Right.
So I think that power becomes palpable, if not completely immediately, I would say after about 3.
Yeah, I'd say probably 3 is about the magic number. It does definitely require consistency. Mm-hmm. I have seen, you know, I've been involved in the plant medicine world for a while now, and the changes that I've seen from consistent attendance at men's council are as profound, if not more profound, than the changes I've seen in people who are consistently doing plant medicine work. Yeah, and our teacher in the Native American Church, who used to run a men's sweat lodge every Wednesday 4 times a month, now we do a men's council 2 times a month, and he said that he's seen more progress in the men with 2 councils a month rather than 4 sweat lodges a month.
Wow.
So it's the slow burn, like Eric was saying. It's the work without the fireworks, basically. You know, you don't get the amazing psychedelic experience of all-encompassing love. You get it in smaller, subtler ways that I think are much more sustainable. Yeah, much more sustainable, you know? And I'd say the example Eric brought up is pretty typical. And, you know, an example comes to mind, especially at Counsel we had maybe a couple of months ago, where 2 new guys showed up and they just dove right into it. And I think everyone was in tears. I know I was. Yeah. It was incredible to watch these guys just... I mean, to me, it felt like, and I think that they would agree with me, it felt like their shares were actually very important, pivotal moments, at least in their year, if not their life, you know? And that's the power of it. It blows me away. Yeah. As someone who's there all the time, who facilitates it, some guy can show up who I've never seen in my life, and he can just say something that's going to have me in tears and give me something to really meditate on for potentially weeks thereafter.
Yeah. It's because what you're describing right now, I mean, going back to the note that you made earlier about how much healing you receive from this experience as facilitators. I mean, it's kind of like a well-known bit of knowledge is, you know, in order to learn something, in order to become an expert at it, become a teacher. Because when you're trying to teach somebody else the same thing or trying to, you know, hold space for them to do it, that in turn is going to teach you. Yeah. And I would like submit to any listeners out there who, my secret scheme is for somebody to start their own counsel somewhere else, hopefully in Pensacola, Florida. I mean, I'm looking in your direction.
You, Haim.
That's all you, Haim. I would imagine there are people out there, you know, whose first thought is like, this sounds awesome. I would love to start something like this. I don't feel like I am at the level of Zen and leadership that Edward and Eric are at. What makes me qualified to start a circle or a council in my city? And I would love for you guys to answer that.
If you don't mind, honestly, Zen has nothing to do with it. Yeah. We are just as human as everybody else, and that's the important part. Yeah. You don't want somebody, as I was speaking earlier, that's up on the mountaintop all the time, kind of holding the court for this. You want somebody that's going to cry right along with you because, shit, man, they've been there too, or, you know, they've had loss in their life. Like, it doesn't take, we really do, is speak for a little bit longer than everybody else, realistically. And that's just to set up the guidelines so that the process can happen. And then the process takes hold. Right. And the work is done by the circle. So if you're thinking of doing it, just do it. Yeah. It doesn't take a higher mindset. You don't have to meditate every day. You don't have to sit with entheogens. You don't have to read spiritual novels or self-help books or anything. You just have to care and listen.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful advice. And I mean, would you guys be able to describe ways that you yourself have grown in the time that you've been doing this?
Totally.
And either one of you can take over.
You know, my answer to that question just quickly would be what qualifies someone to do this? Willingness. Yeah. That's what qualifies someone to do this. You don't need anything except a space in which to host people, something to use as a talking stick, and the willingness to model how it's done. Right. And the only thing that you have to do then is be willing to be open and honest and vulnerable. So really all you need is willingness and a space and a stick, and you're good to go. If you need any help, you can call me. Yeah. So the question was what we've gained from it?
Can you
Oh man.
Can you find a very like almost like measurable thing that you could see in yourself that has changed in the time that you've been on this journey?
The biggest thing for me is listening. Eric can attest. I used to be a terrible listener. I loved to hear myself talk. I still do to some extent.
You have a great voice.
Well, thank you.
And you know how to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. I like it when you say that to me. You can talk now. I mean, my archetype is the storyteller, and before I was the storyteller out of balance, it had to be all about me. And I was always telling my stories. And then as I started to heal and grow, I began to hold space for other people to tell their stories. So I'm still very much interested in story and in the alchemical, healing, transformative power of sharing our stories. And I do share my stories for my own personal healing, but I also share my stories to model and to show the power of vulnerability. And I would say the one thing that I would point to above everything else that I've learned from Counsel is how to really listen. And it is a practice that I will be refining every day for the rest of my life.
Right.
It will never be finished. As the quality of my listening has increased, the quality of my life has increased. And I am 100% certain that there is a direct and powerful correlation between the two. And a lot of times, I find myself gratefully in a position where people come to me for help and advice frequently now. And a lot of times all I do is listen. And they walk away thinking that I really did something. I really just listened deeply, because they can feel, the heart knows when you're being deeply, deeply, deeply recognized and heard. And it releases oxytocin and serotonin and all these beautiful chemicals. And I just listen.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest number one takeaway I've had from Counsel.
And you can sense it, because like some people are very good at being polite.
Yeah.
And like kind of like playing like they're listening.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're I think people generally are trying to do their best. Like these aren't like, obviously it's not a malicious thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a difference between when you can tell like somebody is listening to you with every cell in their body versus like they're listening, they're doing their best to keep up, but they're mostly trying to just kind of be nice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Eric, do you have one?
The listening has also been such a great gift to receive and we're all human, we're going to fall out of attention at some point, but to just bring the attention back, and it's such a gift because you get to receive the wisdom of the human experience by listening to people from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds and races, religions, creeds. You get to hear their experience and the way that they are looking at things. And it just opens you up. You see the fifth corner in the four-cornered room all of a sudden. Like, well, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And it's been such a wonderful teacher. Every single one of those men in every single circle that I have ever been privileged enough to sit in, I've learned so much about kindness and gratitude and compassion and pain and how we can deal with it and what it looks like to wear our scars proudly. And it's really, this is going to sound a little cliche, but it turns you into a student of the human experience by being a witness to what everybody else brings to the table. And it's beautiful.
Right. How would you answer when people ask, which I'm sure they do, why men? How come it's not open to everybody? Is it exclusive to only, like, do I have to have a penis in order to come experience this thing?
That's a great question. We haven't run into this with the Counsel yet. I've run into this with other projects that I've been involved with just the prominence of gender fluidity, which I'm a big advocate of. Like, yeah, let's blur the lines. Let's do it. I'm all about it. We, for the sake of this Counsel, we do cis-identified men. And there are there are women's councils as well, and there are more and more coming out, like gender fluid councils and transgendered councils and all of that. I would say that I think that there is a unique experience of being a cis-identified, cisgendered man, and that, as we've discussed, a part of that experience tends to, unfortunately, involve being told or shown or taught that expressing emotions is not what we do.
Right.
So that's why I think it's important to just have this for men. Not that any sort of gender identification whatsoever. It's equally important for everyone to have a council. And I think that to find solidarity, on whatever spectrum of the gender experience one identifies oneself, I believe that it's important to find solidarity with like-minded people along that spectrum.
Because the structure of the council can easily be implemented into any different kind of group, really.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, women's council, another gendered unspecified council, the same structure, just this particular one that you guys are running is cisgender males. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Without, obviously, giving away anybody's, private secrets, has there been any surprising threads of ideas and discussions that have come up in council in the time that you've been involved? You're like, I did not expect this one.
Towards the end, I don't think you were there. There was only about 7 of us. Somehow masturbation became the theme of the evening, and but in this day and age, with porn being such a readily accessible thing and really being an issue for a lot of men especially, that came up very, very prevalently. And,
Came up, no pun intended.
Yeah. But it's
not going to let Dick joke go.
No, you can't.
We're not that evolved.
Yeah.
Put it up there for you. But again, it's another, we live in an unprecedented time for us as a species. Our access to information, our access to sexuality, and what it looks like for us is evolving at, a second-by-second rate. So it's...
Is it like the no-fap movement? Is that have you heard of this?
Totally,
That's what it's called? Yeah.
I'm not familiar with
it.
Big advocate of it, actually.
Yeah. It's masturbation to porn specifically, online porn.
Yes.
And please correct me if on any of this I'm wrong. My understanding is that this youngest generation of men, younger than us, is the largest. It's the largest percentage of young men in history that we know of who are dealing with erectile dysfunction.
Yeah.
Because think about the first time you saw hardcore pornography. We're on the same age group, all of us. I think it was a homeless guy that lived somewhere in my neighborhood had left a few pages out, in the area that he squatted, and me and some of the other kids found it on our way home from the bus stop. Mm-hmm. And we were I don't know, middle school.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that we just even saw certain parts of the female anatomy, much less actual penetration, actual hardcore sex acts. Now, kids have access to it pretty much from the minute they can access the internet, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Mm-hmm. And so this completely messes with the way that the brain is wired on how it takes this information in.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's in my opinion epidemic, absolutely epidemic, and it's it is in my opinion it is potentially the primary scourge of masculinity. Yeah. In our modern culture. And I come from a past of pornography addiction. I watched it dismantle my life. And I've told that story. And will continue to tell that story. Because what we need, I believe, are more men to come out and talk about it. And that is not why I started the Men's Council at all. It has come up in Men's Council, absolutely. And to have it be brought to men's attention that a lot of men are like, whoa, wait a second. Porn is something you can get addicted to?
Yeah.
And then it kind of gets guys going, Jesus, am I addicted to it? Wait, what is an addiction? How many times? What's my pattern? What's my behavior? What's my relationship? How is it affecting my relationship with women? How's it affecting my relationship with my woman? You know, or my man, my boyfriend, you know, it's and man, yeah, that one is near and dear to my heart because it really is just wrecking relationships, and it is wrecking masculinity, and it is distancing us from a relationship to and with the feminine that desperately needs to be bridged. That gap needs to be bridged with compassion and with understanding and with peace and with an olive branch every single day. Every single day we have got to do everything that we can as men, as responsible, forward-thinking, conscious men to heal the gender wound. Right. Because there's a lot of men out there who are doing nothing to heal the gender wound.
And they're mostly, I would think that they're mostly people are completely unaware. Men are totally unaware that this is a thing that is affecting their relationship with their partners. Yeah. Just this past weekend, I was out in the desert, and we went out to this space where there was nobody for, we're very isolated. We're very far away. And I got to experience silence at a level that I did not know was physically possible to experience without going into a isolation chamber. And I imagine, just even hearing you describing this scenario, it made me think of that, because it makes me think about, how many experiences men are having right now with their partners, with their wives, with girlfriends, boyfriends, whoever your partner is, where you're not realizing that you're not totally present. Mm-hmm. You're being intimate with your partner, but you're almost using your partner as a tool of masturbation, rather than actually connecting with your partner and really being in that deep spiritual intertwining.
Absolutely.
And I imagine just being able to have conversations like this and bringing men together to have these kinds of conversations is, it's such a huge step towards healing that wound.
Absolutely. Porn is very, very, very addictive. I mean, the buttons that it pushes in the brain, and to attach to one of the greatest reward centers that humans carry, which is that of orgasm.
Right.
It's very, very...
Because it's not as simple as I turn on a video and I watch it and I orgasm. It's, you have infinite access to whatever hardcore sex act your mind feels like checking out. Mm-hmm. And you're not even watching the whole video. You're jumping ahead to whatever the top part is. It's to use music as an example to any of our listeners who might not be familiar with the experience. You know how a DJ will plan the perfect drop in the perfect section of the set, starts off by getting you into the story, and then kind of hour and a half into it gives you a really good drop, and that feeling you get that just feels beautiful, explosive, ecstatic dancing that comes out of it. Now imagine if the DJ's doing nothing but drop after drop after drop. And before you know it, you need to take more and more drugs because the drops are not hitting you as hard. Basically, I just described EDC. This is what I did. But it's basically that. And if you can train yourself to kind of take a step back and find that wave on your own so that you can experience that drop without the extra drugs.
Totally.
It's a much better high.
Yeah.
There's so much potency and power in harnessing sexual energy and employing it and using it rather than allowing it to use us. There's I'm a big advocate of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. I mean, it was written in the 30s. It's still completely valuable today. Yeah. And he talks about how most men don't hit their stride until they're 40, because that's when the sex urge starts to go down. Right. So if you can really access sex transmutation in whatever way that works for you, it works. This shit's amazing. When you're not spilling it out all over the goddamn place, it's amazing what you can achieve and how you just don't even really miss the frequent / obsessive masturbation. It's like I don't care really, you know. I use it for other things. I use it to write. I use it to create. I use it with my partner, you know. And it's the reward is so much. You can't even compare. Like, you cannot even compare. A local tantra teacher who I respect greatly talks about how men have scarcity mentality with sex, and he used the hamburger versus 5-course meal mentality for a metaphor, where he's like, men are just running around like just shoving food into their mouths, you know, with sex. They're just doing whatever they can, whether it's porn or drunken hookups or probably when it's like, just wait and cultivate yourself and find the right person, and you can have the most exquisite 7-course meal that you could dream of with this person. And who the fuck cares about all the hamburgers? It doesn't matter, you know? Yeah. So, but that requires discipline and patience.
Yeah. Well, and we don't think about it in these terms in our society, there is a sacredness to sex, to the human orgasm, that is oftentimes, for a lot of people, as close as they will experience God.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of us have experienced it through entheogens or through meditation, but for your average person who maybe doesn't have the option of walking a spiritual path, that's it. That is your true connection to source, divine, whatever you want to call it. So if you think about wasting that 2.5 minutes of a video, like, that puts things in perspective. Right. You're like, well, maybe I should save this for a time and a place when it can really take me somewhere, instead of just chowing down on a hamburger on a street corner because you can.
Right. It'll be, the drop will just hit much better. It's a much better drop. You don't even need any drugs.
You know, go bike and find a good DJ. You know? Go to the other side of the playa, man. 9 o'clock sucks right now. Let's go over to 2.
It's usually trashed by the end of the weekend anyway.
Yeah, exactly, you know.
Good. We made our Burning Man reference. Done. What is sort of like the most consistent theme that you discover from men's counsels? It doesn't have to be like one specific story, obviously, but just like a consistent idea or theme that seems to come up the most. Like you described solidarity earlier, like people experiencing that for the first time.
What gets said pretty much every meeting multiple times is gratitude. Is because people are going through stuff, and that's what I get reminded of when I go to counsel. I'm, you know, not to say that I don't go through stuff, but I really feel so blessed to have a really amazing life right now. And, you know, some of the things that men bring to counsel, I'm like, whoa, that is heavy. That's real heavy. And 95+% of the time, they all, in a 5 to 6 minute share, will inevitably start talking about things that are going right for them and things that they're grateful for. And I find that is a theme and a thread that weaves its way into every single circle we have.
I would almost argue that the kind of, once you're attracted to the idea of personal development and growth, and you're honoring yourself by taking the step towards joining a council, little by little, I imagine you start, either you already were sort of on that track, or you start to become more aware of how valuable gratitude is and how much you can focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's whatever the opposite of a vicious circle is.
Right? Yeah.
Vicious cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that actually touches on sort of the next question that I had. Do you guys have any thoughts on like what men could do to facilitate a better tomorrow for the kinds of dialogue that men are having, which in turn trickles out to the outside world and how men behave? Aside from starting their own men's council.
You mentioned culpability. One of my teachers refers to it as knowing your motive. What is the impetus behind your thought process? Are you just lonely? And can that loneliness be cultivated in a different manner? Does it have to go into this dereliction of sexual thought? Or can you appreciate beauty for beauty and maybe take those energies and focus them elsewhere? It's not easy. I know it's not easy. It's something I've been trying to do for over the past 2.5 years. But what is it, 21 days to form a new habit?
Yeah.
You can restructure your neural pathways. It is completely possible. It was within our grasp, and it does not take a miracle. It does not take even necessarily all that much guidance from anybody other than yourself.
Right. You
just have to realize, where are you coming from with this? And maybe take a little step back and say, well, okay, I'm feeling a little lonely. Like I thought I was horny, but I actually just want to snuggle and appreciate that. Yes, that woman is aesthetically absolutely gorgeous, and it can end there.
Yeah.
And I think that's totally possible. I would say cutting out porn is a really good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Because that's downloading a lot of that aggressive sexual imagery into your head.
Yeah.
It's very power-based. And
as you said, click after click after click, you're getting these... I'm sure your brain doesn't even quite know what to make out of it.
Right.
Until it becomes normal in your brain.
Yeah.
And then it's just the way that the neurons are firing. And that's kind of scary.
Right. Yeah, that's such an excellent point, because I mean, ultimately what it comes down to is that the amount of energy that you're allowing into your space, that's going to affect your general energy. Mm-hmm. So if you're regularly watching porn, you can be, the best person in the world. I mean, I don't doubt that. I'm certain we have lots of people in our lives who are struggling with that experience. Mm-hmm. But if you're constantly watching this thing that is designed specifically, it's very rare that you run into porn that's shot to show two people connecting on a soul level. It's not. So it's and again, and I think it's also. I do believe that there's a lot of healing things that do come out of sexual adventurousness and kink.
Sure. Absolutely.
I mean, that's a whole different podcast that I would love to do. But the kind of porn that we're describing is a lot of the mainstream stuff, which is it is a lot of it's aggression, it's power, it's very dominant, it's very disrespectful to the female experience, and to the male experience, which we don't say that because it looks like the guy's in power, but it's not really. The more you're allowing that energy to circulate in your own brain, the more your brain is going to go towards those kinds of thoughts. Mm-hmm. And little by little, it'll reverberate. So, I would almost sum it up as saying quit porn and join a men's council so that you can feel comfortable being able to talk about things like maybe I kind of really just want to snuggle.
Yeah.
The first thing that popped into my head when you spoke, and this is something that I have a past of living double lives, and part of that was my pornography addiction. Part of that was constantly wanting to have my cake and eat it too. Mm-hmm. I wanted the loving, committed girlfriend at home, and I wanted to go out and just be a 23-year-old guy that was getting drunk and hitting on every woman that moved. But I wanted both, so I would lie.
Yeah.
And I think, to answer your question, what can men do? I think that men can strive for ultimate transparency in every avenue and corner of their lives. To be, the way I try to live my life is that if somehow, hypothetically, my mom or my girlfriend or anybody could see me At any given moment of any day, in any activity or any conversation, they wouldn't see a side of me that shocked them. They wouldn't see a side of me that they didn't already know. Because I do my best to just be honest and totally transparent. So it's not like I'm doing these things when I'm alone that would shock people if they were to see it, or saying these things that would shock people if they were to hear it. It's just, I am who I am.
Right.
And I think that there are a lot of people, not only men, but just people who have these divisions of life of I'm this way around one person and this way around, and I don't tell this person that, and I don't, and it just, there's a saying in AA, you're only as sick as your secrets.
Right.
And secrets are a petri dish for shame, which is the lowest emotion. Shame is the lowest emotion. It is the bargain basement puddle of the emotional pool.
Right.
And it takes a long time to get out of it because you have to go through more negative emotions to even get to the level of courage, which is where it begins to transmute into positivity. So I think absolute and utter transparency is a really, really good place to start. And if there are areas in one's life in which one is like, well, I really wouldn't want so-and-so to know about this, or to know that I said this, or to know that I do this. Well, that is shame waiting to happen. That is a seed of potential shame.
Absolutely.
That is just waiting to be watered with secrecy. And shame begets shame. And secrets beget secrets. And they all beget separation. Because one feels as an outside thing. One feels not connected, reptilian. And one feels that one needs to be punished. So I think that if we as men and as people can just strive for transparency and strive for honesty and strive for personal culpability in a way to say that, maybe one is doing something that you wouldn't want your partner to see, but to say, you know what? Yeah, I did. I looked at porn for 3 hours the other night, and here's why.
Right.
And I'm willing to talk about it. And I love you. And whatever it needs to be, but to just be fucking honest. It takes bravery and it takes courage, but it's so much better than the ulterior options. It's so much better to just be honest, to not carry all of this shit around. It's exhausting. It's tiring.
It's easier to be honest.
It's easier. If
you don't have to remember a bunch of shit.
You don't have to remember what you said.
Yeah.
And it separates us, and it creates illness in the body and in the mind and in the heart. So I just think just absolute, utter, honest transparency of, you hear like bachelor parties and shit like that of men, or guys' nights out where men are just going out and doing just despicable things where it's like, it's disgusting. Like, why is your life constructed in such a way that you need this? You literally can't be who you are around your partner, so you have to go act like a cave dweller in Vegas. I mean, it's
Yeah.
So honesty.
Yeah. No, I think honesty is a good trek, and I would bring it around back to say, this is where I believe personally that the power behind having a men's council or a brotherhood or any kind of other movements where men can feel this safe space to be honest with each other, and I'm certain you guys have already seen this, that reverberates into their lives outside of the circle. Mm-hmm. Because first in the circle, they become comfortable with it. They're undoing decades of socialization and training and programming. Then that follows them out into the world. And ideally, that makes them feel more and more comfortable. So when and if a situation like being on the tour bus with Trump comes up, maybe if that individual had experienced the men's council, maybe they would have felt a little more confident, stepping away from that conversation. Absolutely. Rather than laughing along and submitting to the rich, powerful guy that's saying, this is okay.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to take more and more men to stand up and say that, no, that's not okay. This is not okay. And to recognize that transparency and vulnerability and honesty are armor. Mm. That is the greatest armor that one can obtain in this life, is that if I choose to be vulnerable, if I choose to be transparent, if I choose to be honest, like really a lot less is going to get to me. There's a lot less on the line because what you see is what's just here. Here I am. Right. You know, this is me. Yeah. So
I think that's actually, but just a side note, that's probably a good thing that will come out of future generations of never knowing a life without social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck your secrets. Yeah. Yeah, you're not holding on to any of that. Well, great. Let's just go ahead and wrap this up over here. Do you guys have any plans for the coming year in regards to Men's Counsel, or just going to continue doing it twice a month the way it's supposed to?
Go ahead. Oh, I'm hoping to attend the training in Ojai. The next one's in January. That's probably not going to happen, as that's very soon. But
that's great.
Just, looking forward to, and I'm in school right now, so I'm unable to attend as of right now. Hopefully that'll be changing in the next 6 weeks. But looking forward to just opening up that circle to more people and learning more of the nuances of the council to just continue to spread. It's medicine. Right. It's absolute medicine. To continue to spread that medicine out, because we need it really, really badly right now. And having been a witness and a patient of that medicine as well, it's so utterly, quietly profound that I know it can take hold and catch and make a big difference.
Right. And if a listener wants to start their own counsel, what do you recommend they do?
I would recommend buying a book called The Way of Counsel. It is by Jack Zimmerman and Virginia Coyle. They are some of the elders of the Ojai Foundation. And it's a textbook. It's got to be 330 pages. A nice starting point is to look at the intentions of counsel and just start. Right. I am, if people want to find me on Facebook, Edward Deull on Facebook, maybe we'll be in the show liner. Like, I am personally willing to communicate with anyone who wants to start a council of their own, whether it be a men's council, women's council, cis council, transgender, any kind of council at all. Yeah. I'm totally willing to do what I can to support people in that process, because I believe in it very, very, very strongly. And we're continuing the council here in San Diego twice a month. We do a men's sweat lodge once a month. We do 2 men's retreats a year in Joshua Tree. I am paired up with another brother leading men's retreats. It's looking like at least once or twice a year. We got one coming up in Colorado, and I'm actually doing one-on-one men's coaching now as well. So trying to get it out to as many men as humanly possible to really spread this. Don't give up on us, ladies. We're trying our best.
Yes. Yeah. No, for the listeners, anybody, if you do need to get in contact with Edward, you can just easily go to burnerpodcast.com and shoot us a message, and I'll connect you. No problem. But thank you both so much for everything that you do. Thank you for helping to facilitate a better culture among men, and ideally creating better men for the future, because these men will be fathers. These men, might already be fathers, big brothers, etc., etc. So let's thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and I'm extremely appreciative of it. I've done a lot of it, and I've sent you guys people, so
we appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you, Arash, for getting out the message, man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for doing your thing.
What did we say during Ojai? What is it?
Aho! Aho!
There you have it. So you are now listening to the sounds of Navjeet Sarna, the host and producer of Burner Podcast Presents Alkaline, whom I was telling you earlier I went on a romantic Valentine's Day getaway with to Paris somehow. This set was recorded at Soulworks' August 2017 rooftop Eden Party. The Eden Parties are big community events, lots of San Diego's Burning Man in attendance. Soulwork also partnered with the Burner Podcast team to throw Alkaline Live, our fundraiser party on the pier. So make sure you look up Soulwork on SoundCloud. There's a Soulwork podcast. It's got a lot of great DJ mixes on there. Our very good friend Bass Exotic is sort of the captain of the team over there. And Navjeet is also the host and resident of Alkaline Sessions. That is our new monthly Burner happy hour event held at Blonde Bar in San Diego, and that is on the first Friday of every month. We grab some beers and bob our heads to DJs who have been featured on Alkaline Podcast. Links to all this stuff is over at burnerpodcast.com. If you're in San Diego on the first Friday in a month, make sure you come to Alkaline Sessions and hang out with us. We'd love to see you. Please give us a like on Facebook and join the Facebook group. And do leave us a review on iTunes. It helps get the show more visibility, so more of our tribe can be a part of the conversation. All the links are also over at burnerpodcast.com. You can connect with me on all these social medias at Mr. Arash. That's MRARASH. I am most active on Facebook and Instagram, but you can tweet me and stuff as well. Also, make sure to look up Alkaline Podcast on Instagram. Navjeet is doing regular updates over there. Like something and leave a message and say that Arash told you to go do it. He'll get a big kick out of that. I personally am most active on Facebook and Instagram, blah, blah, but told you all that already. Burner Podcast is produced by Rebel Dharma along with associate producer Tori Massey and is released on the first and third Wednesdays of the month and is available on Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, iHeart Radio, TuneIn Radio, and a bunch of other places I keep running into. This show is not hard to find. We do thank you, dear listeners, for all of your support. You are beautiful. Our opening theme music, America's Horse with No Name Remix, is produced by Joman. His stuff is over at soundcloud.com/DJ Joman. So until next time, love and light and all that other crap. Take it away, Navjeet.
always true. My innocence forever gone. I put a spell on you.
Charlie's hanging out with us. Pitiful. So every time I see Charlie, I go, ooh. Just to let Charlie know I remember it. Cocaine we did in the 80s and drinking has got to it. It's got to it. We got like 2 brain cells left. What? Now in Hollywood we did that sort of thing. You know, we French kissed girls in clubs. We licked on girls' faces. We grabbed girls' butts. And they liked it. People say a lot of things under the influence. Come on now. Let's get this story straight. Charlie used a hell of a drug. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Cocaine we did in the 80s and drinking has got to it. It's got to it. We got like 2 brain cells left. What? Now in Hollywood we did that sort of thing. You know, we French kissed girls in clubs. We licked on girls' faces. We grabbed girls' butts. And they liked it. People say a lot of things under the influence. Come on now. Let's get this story straight. Charlie gets out, but Charlie's hanging out with us. Pitiful. So every time I see Charlie, I go, ooh. Just to let Charlie know I remember it. Charlie used a hell of a drug. I must be losing my mind. Well, that's what I'm talking about. I must be losing my mind.
burnerpodcast.com.